Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Over the past week, the House of Lords has been publishing a report every day setting out what it thinks the UK's priorities for Brexit negotiations should be. So what were their main findings? Well, I'm joined by Lord Boswell, Chairman of the Lords EU Committee. Very good morning to you, Lord Boswell. So I suppose it's been like a kind of Brexit advent calendar, one a day for the last week. And the overall impression, certainly I get from reading it, is...
described it like that.
I mean, the overall impression being that it's going to be very complex, goes without saying.
Well, it is going to be very complex, but there's no point in holding back from the discussion. I think we've waited 6 months for a proper public discussion. We're beginning to pick the threads of one up now. We've had some interesting comments this week. Philip Hammond, David Davis, Nick Clegg. I think we're beginning to focus on the reality of what it's going to mean for this country.
Picked out some of the most significant concerns and areas. Let's run through them as quickly as we can. Ireland and Northern Ireland. I mean, was it your conclusion that some kind of border-free area can be maintained between Northern Ireland and the Republic?
I think the strong feeling is it has to be, but it's very difficult to fit in with a system where we leave the single market. So some very careful thought has to be done between our governments to come up with a deal which can fold into the final negotiations.
And then, I mean, I know we're skipping along very quickly, but our time is limited. Trade, could spend hours discussing that on its own. Do you have a sense, I mean, that it's been bandied around a lot, you know, free trade is the answer to it all. Free trade has downsides as well as upsides for those signing up to agreements.
The thing about modern trade is it's about standards and rules as well as the movement of goods. And if you are going to trade widely, you've got to have some agreement on the standards on which you trade. So there is an element of international agreement required whatever we decide to do. We are going to look into further details on this matter, but it is absolutely central to the negotiations.
And did you take at face value what we keep hearing from the other members of the European Union, the other 27, that the four freedoms which relate to being a member of the single market, they are absolutely untouchable?
Well, we never take things at face value if we can avoid it. But on the other hand, they do feel strongly about this. And there will have to be trade-offs in the final negotiations if we're going to get a deal which is beneficial to this country and which everyone can live with.
You looked into acquired rights. Did that include acquired liabilities as well, which was much discussed last week when it emerged that the EU may ask for, I mean, figures have been bandied around 50 or 60 billion pounds or indeed euros for the UK to exit. These are the liabilities that extend way beyond Brexit.
Well, certainly there are liabilities, and that will be a very tough negotiation when we get into it. Our specialist committee is going to look a little more into the whole question of the EU budget and the implications of that for the final negotiations. But I think just the budget deal may be possible, but it won't be by any means the most complicated part of the jigsaw.
What will be, I mean, the issue of, again discussed, the issue of UK citizens living in EU countries and vice versa?
Well, we want to get an early resolution of that matter because I don't think you can treat people as a part of the negotiations as a bargaining chip. And I think everyone wants to have a fair outcome so that people who live and work here feel safe and secure, and our own citizens living abroad also aren't put under any pressure.
Thorny issue of financial services then you looked into, and this a huge one in terms of our economy and the jealous eyes on the continent looking at some of the industry, some of the banks and others working here. I read an interview the other week with Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, saying he's getting about 6 calls a day about relocating.
Well, you do always get a lot of this kind of speculation, but what we have to remember is that the City of London functions as the financial centre not just for Britain, but for the whole of the European Union. And if it moves from London, it isn't necessarily going to go to Amsterdam or Frankfurt or Paris. It may end up in New York. So it's most important that that is thought about carefully, and in particular, this whole question of financial passporting, because a lot of firms have just assumed the passport. They've known they've been able to trade, and the exact definition of how that will work in the future is going to be critically important to their continuing in this country.
Did you get a sense of how important a plan is for these banks and others making long-term plans? We're hearing rumblings, from Japanese banks saying they've got 6 months. They need to know within that time.
Well, we can't necessarily speculate the period, but of course people trading and with responsibility to their shareholders and stakeholders and to their employees have to take a responsible and legal view of their duties. So we do need to get clarification in this, and it may well be another theme that's coming out in all these reports is that we will need longer to be able to adjust to the period, the eventual outcome of the negotiations.
So you're talking there about some kind of transitional arrangement. Did you speculate as to how long that might be?
Well, I think we'll need to do further work before we come up with something, but we will want to be pretty clear about the overall negotiating structure before the government goes into this, or indeed we've signed up to Article 50 as we're promised in the spring.
And I'm just touching on all the areas you touched on. Security was the last one. I mean, it's in all countries' interest to cooperate, to continue that cooperation on security, is it not?
Well, it's strongly recognised that it should be, but of course, when you cooperate, you have again to cooperate within an international structure and some standards and the right institutions. We have Europol at the moment, which has a British lead, for example. We've taken a very important role in that, and we don't want to lose that opportunity because it is central to our security, but also to our neighbours as well. And if I may say, the final report we did, which came out yesterday, was on an apparently quite different subject about fisheries. The point about that is we are up against, if I can put it that way, European countries in the North Sea or in the English Channel, and we have to be able to manage these stocks together, whether or not we're part of the European Union. So we can't cut ourselves off from those decisions. We need to find ways of working it.
Well, plenty of Christmas reading there if you're that way inclined. We're out of time. Lord Boswell, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Well, thank you, and I'm afraid there's more to come in the new year. Thank you and goodbye.
We look forward to it.